Hi, everyone. Wonderful to see you here in our NSE world. Welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 623rd New Social Environment. I'm Eleanor, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring MM Serra and Chloe Stagaman. We are also thrilled to welcome poet Maia Siegel here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter and that here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for actual and necessary decolonial work, but a reminder of place and of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched the stolen land we're speaking from. And now to introduce today's guest and host, experimental filmmaker, curator, author, and educator MM Serra is the executive director of the Filmmakers Cooperative, the oldest and largest archive of independent media in the world. She has created over 30 films. Awards include a 2016 grant from the New York Council for the Arts and New York Foundation of the Arts. Her writings have appeared in Framework Journal, Millennium Film Journal, and other publications, and her films have been presented in many screenings and events around the world. Serra lives and works in New York, where she continues to curate programs, make films, and create community. The Brooklyn Rail's Director of Programs, Chloe Stagaman, is a curator and writer who works at the intersection of art, architecture, and public space. She has an MA in art history with a focus on contemporary art and photography from the Courtauld Institute of Art in London, and a BA in French and art history and architecture from DePaul University in Chicago. And I'm so thrilled, we're all so thrilled to have both of you here today. And it's my honor to pass it over to you, Chloe, our very own Director of Programs. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Eleanor. And thank you, MM, for being here today to have such a great conversation about the Filmmakers Cooperative after a successful week of screenings in collaboration with the Rail in July. Maybe, Eleanor, we can share screen and jump right in into the history of the co-op. And one of the first photos that you put on this is a photo of yourself in front of the pink pony. Maybe we can start there and start with the story of this photograph.
So this photograph is actually from a film that I did in the 90s with Angela Christoph, a German filmmaker who came to New York and was doing a documentary film about like How Happenings community on the Lower East Side, communities, how they formed. And the pink pony was a coffee shop at the time, but it also had in the back a screening room. And I actually showed one of my favorite films, Christmas on Earth, in the back of the pink pony. So, and it was also when we were doing screenings in gardens like La Petite Versailles. So this is a film still from that film, and it's also about community, about working together. And the pink pony no longer exists, but it was a wonderful place to meet and greet and show films.
That's a good segue into the next slide, which features the Filmmakers Cooperative's logo. Can you describe to us what went into the creation of this logo, which has been connected to the co-op since the very beginning and has been updated, of course, over the years? But what do each of these symbols mean relative to the statement of the co-op in 1962?
So actually, the New American Cinema is the legal name, and it was founded in '61. It's the seal of incorporation, which we have, and is the way we pay our, taxes, grant writing, and it's the educational branch of the the Filmmakers Co-op. And the logo, the co-op is 62, the New American Cinema Group is 61, and it's the legal entity. It's the umbrella entity that allows the Filmmakers Co-op to exist and function and get grants and help artists and do screenings. The logo, the design of the logo was actually, I talked to Jonas about this, because when we were digitizing it, he had some comments about the way the fiery NACG, he was concerned about the digitization. He wasn't sure who designed the original logo, but he felt that it was Stan Vanderbeek. And because Vanderbeek was involved in the early, we just preserved working with the Vanderbeek estate, Stan Vanderbeek's early animation, collages. So the design is by possibly Stan Vanderbeek, because those early documentation, it was before computers, so we actually don't have the early art. But the digitized version is upgraded by Sheldon Henderson, our digital archivist, who created the new look or of our logo, or cleaned up our digital presentation.
And we can stay here, Eleanor, that I want to read a part of the 1962 statement, because it's a good segue into the principles of personal vision and of the decay of the product film. So I'm going to read just a small excerpt from it. The official cinema all over the world is running out of breath. It is morally corrupt, aesthetically obsolete, thematically superficial, temperamentally boring. Even the seemingly worthwhile films, those that lay claim to high moral and aesthetic standards and have been accepted as such by critics and the public alike, reveal the decay of the product film. The very slickness of their execution has become a perversion covering the falsity of their themes, their lack of sensibility, and their lack of style. And I'm hoping you can speak to that and to how that's framed 60 years of the Filmmakers Co-op as an organization, now a nonprofit in New York.
So actually, the Jonas's writings, early writings, are so poetic and come from the heart and soul. And the product film he was talking about was Hollywood. And from the beginning, this organization was part of the counterculture. It was against censorship. It was against, for instance, Jonas went to jail for showing flaming creatures. And so he was actually arrested, can you imagine? And Flo and Ken Jacobs, there was a court case. And flaming creatures, if you look at it now, it's grainy, it's out of date film stock. It's almost like it's a charcoal drawing, but it was, homosexuality was illegal and so was drag. Men in what they said, men impersonating women and putting lipstick on. So the product film was the film that was the entertainment film that doesn't challenge the culture or the audience. And the personal vision is the poetics and also the idea of the diversity of perspectives of race, class, and gender. And this organization, the early founders, Jonas Mekas, Adolphus, Shirley Clark was one of the early founders, were all very political and challenged the institutional and the censorship of the dominant, with the mainstream product film. He's talking about Hollywood, he's talking about the motion picture production code and the Legion of Decency.
And maybe that's a good segue to the next slide, Eleanor. which is, I believe, Jonas Mekas. Yeah. So Jonas Mekas obviously played a pivotal role in the co-op, as you've said, which was initially run out of Mekas's loft. And I think that's especially interesting in that Mekas called cinema his home. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to working with Mekas on the co-op over the years, as well as there was an interview that he did with you where he refrained from calling himself the godfather of the co-op and instead referred to himself as a midwife for experimental cinema. And I'm hoping you can speak to that idea.
So actually working with Jonas Mekas and hearing a talk about cinema, it wasn't only talking about cinema, it was, he would always say, no matter what the problem, one time I called him 5 times in a row because we were having, there's always problems, especially in New York, whether it's your lease or it's someone complaining about something. And he said to me, angels will protect us. Go to your garden. Go to your garden, do some weeding, some composting. And that advice, actually, I'm a gardener. And Jonas came from Lithuania. And his mother, actually, if you look at reminiscence of a journey to Lithuania, it's farm country. So I felt that working with him is that he never raised his voice, that when he said, when we would have a discussion about something, it was a learning experience. For instance, Jack Smith's apartment, when Jack died, he died without a will. And they were going to clean out his apartment, throw everything on the street. They legally can do that. If you die without a will, the landlord can go in and trash your place. So I was studying with Hoberman, a mentor at New York University, and I went to Jack Smith's apartment, moved all, I had looked everywhere for the films. They were hidden under the laundry. Anyway, I went in with Penny Arcade and Larry Fessenden. I brought the albums and films to Anthology, and Jonas showed me how to catalog that Jack Smith's albums, to listen to the vinyl collection. Such a pivotal figure, who knew at the time, as Jack Smith. And it was just a relaxed and enjoyable learning experience. And it was a collaboration. It's what cooperatives should be and what communities should be. And it's about learning from each other and for the common good. Personal vision is acceptance and the idea of community and working together for the common good. There'll always be challenges. And Jonas believed that angels will protect us. And hopefully the angels will protect us, but I still garden. And I think gardening is important for community, as well as the Filmmakers Co-op joining community.
Yeah, and you can see the early Filmmakers Co-op office in the next slide, with a note from Jonas there in the bottom right-hand corner, the first home of the Filmmakers Cooperative in 1962. And if you go to the next slide, it says a funny note, but as we were discussing, it's more of an instruction. That's quite serious, actually, in terms of how to, to the projectionist. Maybe you can speak to this and to the role of instruction with the co-op.
Actually, film it's an art form, it's fragile. And Jonas was trying to explain, it's not a funny note. He meant do not cut the beginning and end off the film, because that's what protects the film itself. If you remove the beginning of the leader, the film can get damaged. So also, one time I was at Anthology sitting next to Jonas, and the film went out of focus, and Jonas in 2 minutes was out of his seat, up to the booth to focus and find out what's going on with the projectionist. He was very serious about preserving and keeping the collection safe. And not only safe, but how to project films, how to make films, but also what the proper care of the films were. And I think that's an important, and the amazing thing about building an archive, which after 60 years, we're sort of an archive, is that you will see that we have the original keys. The building is gone, the tree is gone, but the keys are 414 Park Avenue South are still in the collection. If you, and that's also what's important. We have not only the films, is to keep the records of the filmmakers, what they wrote, and what was published, the posters, and everything surrounding the environment and the distribution, exhibition of the creative of the work, and administration. I also had the ad that Jonas placed in the Times when he had to move out of 414 Park Avenue South, so that it's not all scanned. And that's the next process, is if anyone wants to volunteer to scan about 100 million legal documents, not legal, but interesting histories and records. We're in the process of doing it.
Well, and you can start to see that in the next couple of slides. There's a great slide next of the newsletter that accompanied the Filmmakers Cooperative. What was the role of the newsletter? And how did the newsletter really accompany the films that were being distributed?
So one of the important things we learned from Jonas is it's not only making the films, it's writing about the film. Because it's, you make the work, but you communicate through language as well. What are you doing as a filmmaker? And why are you doing it? Rather than saying, well, this critic didn't write about me, you didn't write about me. You as an artist should communicate. And this I learned from Jonas, but this newsletter is to communicate. We didn't have a computer, by the way. All these newsletters, we have almost every single newsletter, almost every single catalog. And the graphics, the covers are amazing. We have a glow-in-the-dark cover. Judd Yelkin, if you have a black light, you can hold it up and see it shines in the dark. And this newsletter has movement. It has a pinhole. And if you spin it around, you can create movement with the newsletter. And we also have a newsletter that has a flip book animation on the bottom, designed by Charles Levine. So it was also that you're part of a community, that someone designs it. Jonas would do the writing, someone would oversee the printing. But I think that the graphics, the idea of being able to communicate is extremely important at that time. And these newsletters still exist. And this is the very first cover. And I think it's a beautiful, powerful design, but I like the fact that it has movement, if you so desire it.
Yeah, and that they were art objects as much as information sources, right?
Right. It would tell you about where venues were opening up, where festivals were. It would advertise like where to get your bullocks repaired, or what labs were good. And we also have like Brackage writing about his films, or writing about someone else's films. And I think that it was the beginning of communication in New York, in the United States, and worldwide.
We can go to the next slide, Eleanor. Maia Darren. Where do we start with Maia Darren, MM?
So Maia Darren actually was an important filmmaker in that she made the film. She organized a symposium, and she worked with Amos Vogel. She actually, Jonas had, and you could hear the tapes of her talking about her filmmaking process. She's the first that invite people into her home, including Shirley Clark. And she would set up her projector and show her films. Then she would rent a theater and show her films. And Meshes of the Afternoon, which we're getting a new print of, by the way, if you're interested in 16. Meshes of the Afternoon was the first film declared a national treasure by the Library of Congress. So, because they started colorizing films, and Meshes of the Afternoon is black and white, and it's to protect, saying this film is a national treasure. Do not colorize the film. And Maya Deren was Jonas recognized her work and her writings, and Maya Deren also studied at the New School. She studied symbolism. She at Smith, and she wrote analog about her work. She not only made the films, she believed it was vertical poetry, that she non-linear, beginning, middle, and end. Her style of filmmaking was non-linear editing, and that is why she was an important figure and inspiration, and sort of a pioneer of the personal vision.
And how did she relate to your own practice making film?
So my own personal practice, well, I would say that Maya Deren's symbolism and dream state, and the way she actually filmed and the layer and editing was incredible, because the end of the film, you don't even know if it's an end. You're in the dream state. She also starred in the film, but she edited and filmed the film. And I would say, Maya would disagree, she's influenced by surrealism. And she wasn't interested in psychoanalysis, but she has the knife, and she has the close-up of the eye where you're going inside the dream. So, and she knew how to film and edit her own films. And she was a dancer. So everything about Maya Deren was creative. And she inspired me to actually challenge it. Sometimes it's and organize. It's also administrate and organize and visualize how you want your work to be seen. And she worked with Jonas Mekas, and I'm sorry, I'm going on.
No, this is great context. We also have an image of an early newsletter and screening promo. But if we move to the next slide, which gives a bit of insight into the Cinematheque and sort of how it related to the workings of the co-op. Do you want to speak a bit to that as well, into the history of the Cinematheque?
So the Filmmakers Cinematheque, the early tours and the early programs, the new American cinema, is how they were describing their personal vision. And you can see they didn't separate like a gay program or abstract program or an animated program. You can see Stan Vanderbeek, Andy Warhol, Jack Smith, Maureen Menken, and Bruce Conner. So it was called underground, and underground actually meant that you were challenging taboos of the culture. And it was underground because it didn't And it was avant-garde because it was before experimental, before they were teaching, before it was avant-garde film in colleges and universities. These programs were to educate an audience and to give filmmakers the opportunity to have their work seen and be present and talk to an audience. And I love the way it's designed, the simplicity of it, and it's open 7 nights a week, which I think is amazing. So New American Cinema Group was actually these early collection of filmmakers. Gregory Markopoulos is also present. And Scorpio Rising and Kenneth Anger was a very important present figure at that time and as a filmmaker in New York City.
You and I have
they were underground is early, like films that could not be shown in commercial theaters because they were challenging taboos and censorship.
You and I have talked a little bit about the meaning of avant-garde in film.
Right. The avant-garde, actually, I was thinking about language because now that film is taught at Bard or at NYU or at the new school where I teach, you're learning techniques. But avant-garde was a French term for a soldier that went into, before the army, into unexplored territory. That investigated and explored and encountered the danger and could be blown up at any minute. But it's the unexplored territory. It was the one person that took the risk. And I think that avant-garde is an important term for filmmakers who were pioneers and who help change the culture.
But you had sort of two things coexisting with within the co-op, because you had this strong emphasis on personal vision and on the personal, that at times in many of the films in the collection evokes a very lone kind of independent perspective. And then you had the co-working and the collaboration and the working together. And how did those two things consolidate over the years and in the early history?
So actually, if you look the personal or the diary films, you're not sitting in a room with the camera pointed in yourself. You have Jonas Mekas going out always with his camera. Now right. You have everyone has their iPhone. You know, everywhere you go, you document, you film. Jonas always filmed. So the personal vision was the poetics, and it was embraced everything. It was non-judgmental. For instance, in our collection, that first decade, I'm still discovering films. I mean, someone wrote to the co-op and said, "Do you have a film called Penis?" And Jonas said that it was the best film out of Chicago. And I said, "Penis? How can you have a film in a collection called Penis?" I don't think so. It's A.J. Rose. And so I went into his file because every filmmaker, Jonas made we have a file, who they are. But that the only thing that file said, the best filmmaker out of Chicago. And so we have a scholar named Dr. Josh Guilford. And so he came to investigate if we had Penis, because people wanted to see Penis. They wanted to pay to have Penis digitized so they could see something that Jonas in 1967 said was a real film out of Chicago. So we discovered, not we, Josh Guilford discovered that penis was illegal to say penis. You couldn't distribute in the 70s. So its name was changed to 1967. And A.J. Rose is a mystery. So I'm writing to, I was writing to Chicago Film Society that because I thought they would be able to explore and investigate who the person was, if it was, we're still investigating who the artist is, but it's the idea that the collection was really open to everyone and diversity, like Edward Owens, who actually worked at the co-op, Barbara Rubin, who worked at the co-op in the early 60s. And these films dealt with the body and taboo and censorship issues that you could, then you can't say penis. Now you don't want to say penis. Now even now you're dealing with issues of censorship on the web, you know, like a woman's breast. You can't show a nipple on Facebook. Now, who knew that? Till the Filmmakers co-op was taken off Facebook. And they're going, why? You know, what was it? Well, it was a woman's breast. So I'm getting into issues of censorship. But what the underground or experimental avant-garde was challenging was censorship. It was freedom of expression.
And we have a clip actually from an Edward Owens film to show, which now seems like a really good time to show that. We can jump to that, Eleanor.
And we actually, working with Chicago Film Society, are premiering the restore. This is actually Jack Waters and Peter Kramer's. Oh, okay, good, thank you. Here's Edward Owens, 1966. This is his mother. It's silent, sorry.
And Edward Owens worked for the co-op, right, Emma? And was involved.
Mm-hmm. Actually, he did, and we were his first distributor. Jonas brought him into the co-op because he was very young when he made these films. Mm-hmm. And he studied with Gregory Markopoulos, the superimposition. And it's early drag. He's actually in drag in these films. But it's his mother is in the film, and they're that's his mother, gentle and loving. There's a tenderness to Edward Owens' films, an exquisite. We were layering.
I think that's great, Eleanor. And I think if we zoom into the next slide, it's a perfect segue to talking about right now, 60 years on, the role of diversity to the curatorial voice that the co-op has, and how you think about with the co-op team about the voices that are present within the co-op and representing the co-op at festivals, and maybe you can speak a bit to that.
So actually on the top, this is slides divided into 3 sections. The top section is very important. We actually have the most exquisite web designers in Poland. Lucas, and you should check out our website. It's incredible, and they designed everything, and it's interactive, and we actually have GIFs on our website, so you can go and look at movement. We have a store, we have a VOD, Vimeo on demand. We have protest films in solidarity that Rachel Goom and I did in support of Black Lives Matter that we put on Film Freeway. So it's from all over the world, it's free, and you will be able to see it on our VOD, our programs, even audio, even a collection of audio interviews with filmmakers. On the left-hand corner is Victoria Caddy. And Victoria Caddy was a guest curator at the Film Co-op, and she put together a program of early films that Gary Doberman actually used television. And it's early television. And that's Gary Doberman's wife and son who came to visit and were at the screening. And on the right side is, I don't know if Jonas would be offended, but Greg Bierman actually, that's a t-shirt we have, decided to animate our logo and make it more interactive. Or not interactive, make it more humorous and visible. So you can see that now, to me, the most amazing thing that's happening is the idea of digitization and the opportunity for showing these films and in a variety globally and making DVDs. We're collaborating with Red Noir, where we do compilations DVDs that includes writings about the work, and we're publishing books. And
how has digitization and streaming affected the initial mission to openness and audiences for the co-op? Because I would imagine it's affected it quite significantly.
It has affected it. And I will say we were slow getting into digitization. And then COVID, we have an amazing digital archivist, Sheldon Henderson. And it was usually people coming to us, like the Prada Foundation digitized 150 films. They came, they looked, the Victoria Albert, the Tate Modern. They would look at the film print and then pay to have it digitized. But that's to facilitate visibility, working with the artists or signing contracts that say this is educational and this will be seen at this museum, or that way in England or touring through England and Europe. But digitization is also can be, it's a question of visibility for the work. Like Edward Owen's actually 16mm prints, no one really wrote about him for a period of time. And when we digitized it with Indie Collect, we actually bartered. They had free rent with us for a while. They digitized it and we put it on VOD, and 21 different countries, South Africa, Chile, Turkey. Someone in Turkey wrote and said, we're going to promote it. We want these films to be seen. And now this year, the New York Film Festival is actually going to premiere a new set of 16mm prints. So these films have been preserved on celluloid. So it's visibility. And Jonas embraced digitization, like Christmas on Earth, which is a performance film from the 60s, live sound. So I walked into the Boo Hurrah gallery and it was all digitized all over the wall. And I said, Jonas, and he said, yeah, I want it, I have her writings. He got the writings out. He wanted people to see the work. And he put it on Mubu, ubu.com. So you can actually see it to make the work visible. So it's a discussion. There are some artists that want to be what they call purists, but then that means you have to travel or have the money to come and see it in the theater. So did I answer that question?
You did. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting, the juxtaposition. Much of the work of the co-op was about educating and encouraging a certain type of spectator, right? An engaged spectator. And how has that, you know, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how that's evolved with streaming and in the world that we live in now, where there are endless distractions and changes to technology have sort of, you know, it's an easy question to ask, but curious to get your thoughts on how you think about it and through the lens of the co-op.
So certain films that we have in the co-op, that Jonas brought in the 60s and 70s. Johnny Minotaur, 1971, Charles Henry Ford, preserved and then censored. And you cannot put Johnny Minotaur online. You can't stream it because the internet will explode or something. I showed it in a movie theater, and I brought a scholar from Canada who came down, who writes about the body, introduced the film contextual. And I will tell you that if you look at it, it's shot on 8mm. It has grain the size of golf balls. And so there, it's filmed in Crete, and Charles Henry Ford had a place there. And the kids are running around nude. So I said to Jonas, you know, I can't, they're censoring Johnny Minotaur. When it came out, like William Buckley Jr.'s wife was there. So Jonas said to me, well, pornography is in the eyes of the whole, it's poetry. It's a film within a film. But if you're looking for pornography or if you're getting excited by it, then it's pornography to you. And I thought that that was a good example. So what I'm saying about streaming, you're not going to stream everything. You're not, because the internet is censored. And like I was thinking about it in Instagram, because I'm on it. Like I'll select one image, and then a week later I'll put another image, and then I'll look, and someone has put like 1 second of film, and is that a movie? Is that cinema? You know, because I'm thinking that people like Jonas Mekas outtakes from Life of a Happy Man, that's like 50 years worth of cinema that he put together and talks to you. And it's so complicated. Every time I see it, if I see it 10 times, I see more and understand more. And what it is to be an artist and to live when Jonas lived and when we're living now. So I think that the internet is can be communication, and it can be a distraction. And for me, it's both.
And I think if we move forward, Eleanor, to MM's slide, which is right here, yeah.
I want to say one last thing about the internet, because I teach, and I had a student who made masks, and you know, for the class. And so I looked at the mask and I said, "Where did you, you know, get that image?" And she says, "Oh, I took it from the internet." And the mask was Caravaggio. She didn't even know she was taking a famous painting of a self-portrait of a famous artist. She just downloaded, thought, "Oh, this is good, I'll use this." So it's narratives and historical and educational. It's complicated. All right, I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. That's great. I think this is a good moment to turn a bit to you and to your work making films, avant-garde films specifically, and films of your own personal vision, and your influences from Shirley Clarke, as well as your experiences working in advertising and how those two things have shaped your vantage point as a filmmaker.
So Shirley Clarke was actually, I was working at the Academic Senate at UCLA in the beginning in 1980. And I heard that Shirley Clarke was teaching at UCLA, and I knew who Shirley Clarke was, that she was part of the Warhol group. So I went to her classroom and it was packed and the students were sitting on the floor, but I wanted to audit her class because I knew she was an incredible filmmaker. Her students made 1-minute films. She said, if you can make a 1-minute film, you can make a feature. What is it you want to say? So I went to her and asked if I could audit her class, that I needed to learn to tell stories, and that I had, and she let me audit her class for like a year and a half. And she would say, I'll give you the combination of the editing room. I don't know if I should say this, but I am. And just go like on a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. And when other students are needing it that are paying money, you're not paying money. So I said, fine. And that's how, and so Shirley Clarke talked about what is the essence of what you want to say. It's like it's like haiku, and it's structure, content, and form. And in advertising, I was telling Chloe earlier, while I was working at the co-op, I worked in advertising, and I actually learned in advertising at lowly level, but how to write copy. What is it you want to say? What is it? And also the image. A single image can convey commodity fetish, desire. Like someone will pay $300 for a perfume, and it's just a fragrance. Why are you? And it's the commodity fetish culture that's being advertised. And also, when I could teach sex, gender, and media at the New School before it became difficult, I brought in the ad for the Gucci model, who was hospitalized for being so skinny, for being like a clothes. She was losing hair, and I thought, why are people, or when this happening within our culture? It's marketing. And what's important about the film co-op to me is a sense of community and personal individuality, keeping your individuality and your identity and who you are, and investigating, and not to be seduced. And it's by the product film that Jonas mentioned, or the products that are slick and packaged and marketed so well within our culture.
Can you tell us a little bit about ArtCore? What it is, how you define it?
So because my name is Mary Mag, right? MM stands for Mary Magdalene. And when I was 5 years old, and I found out that Mary Magdalene was the whore in the Bible, I was like, really? If you would do this to me, you would name me after a prostitute. But as an artist, it let me stand outside the heteronormative capitalism. It gave me the ability to think, why? What is a prostitute? What is the woman as other as flesh? So when I made, there's a slide, I think it's back where it has all the images. If you can find it.
It's one next, I think, Eleanor.
And I made one, L'amour fou, and
maybe one more. Maybe one more, Eleanor. I think, yeah, it's 17. Yeah.
It's on the upper right-hand corner. And I made L'amour fou, which is about gay male S&M. And I made this film, and people were saying it's porn. And I said, it's not porn. Actually, this film was done in 1990 or 93. And it just showed in Paris at the Buttocks Film Festival, curated by a woman, by a group of young women. It's the beginning of AIDS. And I didn't know when I was making the film. And so the lead subject of the film is actually, by the end of the film, dying of a disease, of AIDS. And so it's such an intense film for me. And Artcore is about not labeling the body as porn or not porn, but exploring and investigating. It's art, but it's the core of your being, your identity, who you are. And the other film is Darling International, right across from it, and that also played in Paris recently. So there was, and it's the idea of investigating the body and the freedom to write about the body and explore it, whether it's in language rather than saying that's porn. Because I had a student, actually, I was invited to Indiana University to give a talk, a senior experimental filmmaker lecture. So I thought, well, that's certainly me. I can fall into that category. So I submitted a proposal and they go, no, you can show any film you want, but you can't show that film you selected. And I said, why? And they looked and they told me why. And it had been censored. It was censored. So I went to that. I showed Christmas on Earth. I showed my film. But before I started, I said, I want you to know that I am going to show you and talk to you about the expanding identity, expanding language, and not labeling films porn, so that you will have the freedom to be able to make this work without fear. So the first question was from a young girl in the audience, which said, why not say it's porn? And I said, because you will never get a grant. You will never write to the New York State Council on the Arts and saying, hi, I'm a pornographer, and I want you to fund my work. And that's why. And also, it's a heteronormative, dominant, mainstream society labeling you. You should develop your own label and your own language, expand the vocabulary, expand the visibility to give you the freedom of expression.
Well, I think that's a really good segue into the question I had for you about working with students and, you know, the process of making work while also educating, which has always been integral to the co-op. And what have you learned most from working with students and from your past students and current students?
Well, first of all, I learned from being a student, studying with Shirley Clark, even though you won't find a record, because I audited that class, taught me, gave me language, the opportunity to study and make films. And she's the first to talk about Jonas Mekas and Shirley and the Filmmakers Co-op and gardening. And I teach because I want to inspire and be all ages, however old my students are. But I will say I have a student that I work with named Francesco Acosta, who I asked to shoot 8mm films. His films are incredible. And so I wanted him to do some film. The last film I made in Endless Possibilities, Jack Warner and Peter Kramer, I asked Francesco Acosta, and then to do it. And then I'm talking to him, and then I said, and then I said, how old are you? He said he was 19. And I thought he was 30. I thought he was 30 years old. Nick goes, no, I'm 19. I'm still in college. And I had him come to my class. I hired him to come to my class to show it's not only that he makes films, he collects, like I have here an 8mm projector. And he will set up projector and show found footage. And the excitement he feels, I think, inspire other students to explore and investigate. And so actually the opportunity to work with them is also very exciting for me. And like Julia Carr, who's on our vice president of our board, and also the archivist for John Giorno Foundation, and going to Princeton for a PhD, was my student a couple of years ago at the New School. So it's exciting to see the direction how they explore life and expand their identity. And the ability to have the freedom without fear and angst. There's so much angst in the culture. There's so much fear. Like I get up at 4 a.m. sometimes just to edit my films and look at the film, to start my day by thinking and looking at what I'm working on. And that adds a direction to my day, because if I turn the news on, I'm really excited already. I'm afraid inflation, and Trump's going to rise again. Whoops, I shouldn't have said. Anyway, I fear what's going to happen within our culture. But by actually going inward and looking at what I've shot and what I want to explore and investigate, it directs my day. Then I go to my garden and feed the turtles. Then I go into the co-op. So I suggest to artists to diversify your activities, not to compete with each other. There's the competition out there, writing grants and who's going to get that grant, and there's limited amount of money. I say that there needs to be joining together, building bridges instead of burning bridges. And the co-op allows that opportunity for expansion and growth.
I think that's a really good place for us to open it up to some audience questions, because we've gotten a few questions from the audience during this discussion.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, MM, and thank you so much, Chloe. It's been, as always, an amazing conversation. Super wonderful to hear about all the work that you and the cooperative have done. And we do have some good questions from the audience. So I will start the Q&A. Our first question will be from GE, our friend GE. You should be able to unmute now, GE. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleanor and Chloe. Thank you. And MM, wow, this is wonderful. My question for you, MM, is do you prefer visionary film or avant-garde when we talk about these genres? Or should we just do away complete with these categories because of all their latent and manifest limitations? What do you think?
I think whether you want to label it or not, you will be labeled. And if you don't come up with your label, they will label you as perverse, as weird, as a pornographer. And so for me, I just say experimental or avant-garde. And that's a broad category. And I think labeling it changes over time. And it changes quickly. So that, and you should label your work yourself and write about it. And for me, at first I would say avant-garde. Now I just say experimental, avant-garde, filmmaker, moving image maker is what I said, because now I'm using 8mm, Super 8, 16, digital. And so Moving Image Maker allows for diversity of formats.
Oh, thank you so much. And what an inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, GE. Pleasure talking.
Thank you, GE. And then I believe we have a question from PM Kramer, if you're
Peter.
still here. If you have,
Hello.
great. Hi.
Hi,
Peter.
thank you. Hi, MM. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I was just wondering, my first question, I was wondering, is there a list of all the films that have been digitized over the last number of years? And where can one find that? And then where do you see the co-op going in the next 4 or 5 years?
Peter, first of all, we have this amazing website, and on our website, we have a link to digital catalog that we try. The most amazing thing is that our computer software is called Computer Management System, so that anytime hourly, I can change and update the catalog. I can add your image, change your image, up your prices. It's an amazing versatile. So we have a digital catalog. And it's in the menu page, Peter. And 5 years from now, are we going to be, where do you think the climate's going to be? I mean, seriously, who can predict the future? Here's what I say, because actually I was talking to one of the things is our longtime president since 2009, who's now living in France, Catherine Bauer. I went to France, I showed films every single night. They had film labs and you could go in and project movies and show films. And the Buttocks Women's Film Festival knew. I thought, I'm invited to a Buttocks Women's Film Festival. It was amazing. It was full of like young, hip, cool people. But I interviewed Jean-Jacques Lebel, who started the Festival of Free Expression in the early 60s. And I asked him about the future. Like, if you were doing the Festival of Free Expression, which was early happenings before and early protests, it was political and freedom of expression against censorship. And he was concerned about the society, not just the co-op. He was concerned about the political climate rising towards destruction. And now, for instance, I want to give you an example, Peter Kramer, of our culture right now, not just the co-op. They just made abortion illegal. They want babies to be born, but they don't have baby formula. So they have to bring baby formula in from Germany because the shelves are bare. If the mother can't breastfeed, which happens a lot. So tell me, and they're like, inflation's happening. Of course, inflation's happening. Soon it's like $10 for a blueberry. And then I say to myself, do I need the damn blueberry? So I can project what I'm going to do tomorrow, which is meet Josh Guilford, bring scholars in, talk to people. But I can't predict the future. But my father, Tony Serra, who was one of my heroes, said to me before he died, Mary Magdalene, you want a democracy? You have to fight every single day, every day. And complacency, and oh, it's your fault. It's your fault. You did this, you did that. No, you have to take to the streets. You have to be active, and I think active every single day. Did I answer your question? I love you,
Yes.
Peter Kramer.
Thank you, MM. Continue on.
You too.
Thank you, Peter, for such a great question. Thank you, MM. And it's been such a fabulous conversation today. So grateful for this. We do have a tradition here at the Rail of closing our events with a poetry reading. And I am thrilled to announce and welcome our poet laureate of the day, Maia Siegel, who is one of our very own PAs here at the Rail, to the stage. Maia Siegel's writing is published in Poetry London, the Bennington Review, Rattle, and elsewhere. And of course, she is a production assistant at the Brooklyn Rail. Thank you so much, Maia. You should be able to unmute. Take it away now.
Yeah, hi. It's been such a wonderful talk, and I don't want to take so much more of your time, so I'll just get right into it. On the topic of sort of witnessing the world around us, this first poem is called Epstein's Cabin, Interlochen, Michigan, about the fact Epstein's cabin was on my high school campus. Okay. We all went to the cabin of the famous criminal and stared into the glass and tried to feel the great moral emptiness we imagined slumped on the couch, and we squinted at the limp witness of the lamp, and maybe one of us would paint the bed, which was eerily smooth, but we had to admit in the end, it just looked like a bed from a Hilton Inn. And we saw our reflections through the doors, and our cheeks were still puffy from the boxed wine, chugged in the forest by the three of us, me and the two boys I loved, one of whom was blonde and the other who was lying about his father being dead. Yes, it was simple. There were empty houses of great atrocities, and then to the side, us. Next is a poem called Harkness Gate, New Haven, about touring my college. The branded hats were redundant and everyone wore them anyway. A lawn sat self-satisfied and empty, and I watched it through the gate, wanting to soak up its dappledness, which felt pre-recorded or staged in some way, too perfect in its filtration. I couldn't enter any building and my chest was sweating, and I felt especially vulgar here, which I loved. A father told his son, pose as if you're on top of all this, and squatted down so that his child became a crowning spiral. I also became part stone. I also posed as if I was on top of all this, except there were no camera tricks to make it true. The next poem is called Crowing. Often, the two of us would sit in silence in museum cafes. Sometimes I thought you didn't know me at all. Other times I would imitate a crow and you would know what my cause meant. You told me crows love to have their beaks held into silence. I wanted you to grab mine shut. Instead, you sipped your bottle of tea, staring at the sediment in the bottom. Instead, I talked in slogans for products that didn't exist. I was always selling something, the tea at the cafe, the dimly lit tapestries in the museum. It's important to be an educated consumer, I cawed. Look at the man waving from the weaving, I cawed. The other urgencies I was thinking about how long we would have, I held behind my beak like spit. And then I have two poems, both titled August. August. My father goes under the knife. I cut into an egg and the yolk gushes out. In this movie, the trees all are dying fabulous deaths. I'm jealous of the way they sway before fainting, propped up by the air. I stole some metal with my brother to wrap around our fingers. We didn't know we were marking ourselves for something terrible. He went into work the next day and I brushed my teeth. The terrible thing was that nothing happened. I paid to be entertained and barely paid attention. And he bought a drink at the corner store. We swallowed the great sadness of getting away with it. And then this is August 2. My hair is staining the pillow, and my teeth have shifted from their previous stations. All day I lie around and read about great journeys. Here is my journey to the kitchen to collect some cashews in my fist. Here is my journey in 2 small shoes, toes pressing towards pavement like anxious weeds. Here is my journey to buy a tape measure, a bottle of ginger tea. In the park, a man says, advancement is hard in every field, at least I think, I hope. Here is the advancement you hoped for. Here is lightning striking the park trash can. In bowling, we call that a strike, a birdie, a slam dunk, a score, a home run is when you explode with it. And then the last poem I'm going to be reading is called Night Out Before a Flight. Layering different lipstick colors like sediment, standing at a doorway before kissing both cheeks, a hand reaching into my skirt, a hand reaching out to my blonde friend, no apartment key, huddling in the laundromat at 5 a.m., watching the little corner TV, crying because 2 hours in, the character has finally found someone who loves her and will not touch her, which is maybe the nicest thing somebody can do. Well, in that cinematic universe, cold croissants eaten while walking. In the plane back home, I think about you for 8 hours straight. All right, that's it. Thank you so much.
Wow, Maya, so beautiful. So great. Thank you. And thank you again to MM, to Chloe, to all of you for being here today. And we would also like to thank Matt and Sheldon, whom MM mentioned, and the extended team at Filmmakers Cooperative for helping make today's event possible. We would also like to thank the Terra Foundation for supporting our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on our YouTube channel. And over the past 22 years, the Book and Rail has brought together art, music, dance, film, theater, literature, and thoughtful social and political meditations in our monthly publication and in our public events, like here in our NSE. Please check the chat for a link to donate to support our writers, editors, and operations here at the Rail. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern for a conversation with Charles Gaines and Thurza Nichols, good eve, on the event of the American Manifest at Times Square and Governor's Island. We conclude with a poetry reading by Angeliki Metis. And you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you for joining us today, everyone.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
should have
Thank
given
Thanks,
everybody
Maya.
our email.
Great poems, Maya.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Maya.
Should
Thank
I
you,
give
Anna.
everybody my email address or what? No.